I've been running as long as I can remember, from the deepest caves of the Seafoam Islands to the darkest pits of the Rock Tunnel. It has pursued me. No matter what I do, I see it everywhere. Sometimes, it'll just appear outside of my range of vision. You know the spot I'm talking about. It's that place that exists somewhere just beyond the corner of your eye, where everything blurs when you try to look there. You'd think by now that someone as strong as me wouldn't have to worry about such trivial things. Being chased by a Pokemon, for a so-called Pokemon League champion, it's pretty pathetic when you think about it. The thing is though, I don't even know if this thing is a Pokemon at all. I've got as many type advantages lined up as I can imagine needing, save for a ghost type. After my sole experience in one place in the world that still haunts my dreams, let's just say that I never want to see another ghost Pokemon for as long as I live. The fact remains though, I'm out of places to run now. If the world's strongest wild Pokemon can't provide a barrier against this thing, then I guess I'm out of luck. There's one really stupid part of this whole situation though, and that's what gets me. It's the fact that, even with all my accomplishments, I wasn't strong enough to win this time. Since day one of my journey, I've been powerful. I overcame Blue Squirtle like it was nothing. I powered my way through Viridian Forest as a newbie trainer, dodging poisonous Beedrill, the paralyzing powder of Butterfree, and the deadly high voltage attacks of the Pikachu that lived there. I pounded Brock and his rock types into the dust with one of my very first Pokemon, a male Nidoran that by fortune's fate had learned double kick attack just as we exit the forest. I sank Misty's water types with a Bulbasaur that was kindly given to me to look after by a trainer outside Cerulean. I bested Lieutenant Surge and his live wire of a war-born Raichu. When it came down to the line, a Diglett was all that stood between me and certain defeat there. Sabrina and her psychic types gave me a run for my money, but she too fell against the power of the bond of my Pokemon. Like breaking waves crashing uselessly against a rocky seashore. Even when I made it to Giovanni, the rotten bastard that headed up Team Rocket in secret, using his gym as a financial conduit to partially fund the criminal syndicate, I tore through his ground types as though I was a tornado unleashed. By this point, my Pokemon and I were nigh inseparable, nigh unstoppable. We knew what the other was thinking, without me even having to give commands. Then came the day that we began to compete in the Pokemon League. Such tough opponents were met, and they were all worthy foes. I had to admit, I was beginning to sweat in the final rounds against Lance and his Dragonite, yet even they were no match for me. Once I had bested Blue for the final time, and taken my rightful place at the top of the mountain, I knew. There was not a force in heaven or earth that could touch my Pokemon or I. Or so I thought. With my final adventure into Cerulean Cave to capture the renegade Pokemon Mewtwo, I hadn't thought that there was any challenge left to be had in the Kanto region. So when I travelled to Johto and wiped them clean of their gym badges, I found myself wanting to test my limits more and more. That's when I heard of it. Rumours of a Pokemon so powerful that could bend the fabrics of reality itself. I had bested many tough opponents. I had captured Pokemon so rare that they were thought to be mere legends. This, however, this would be my ultimate challenge. With Pokeballs in hand and my team by my side, we went searching for the mystery Pokemon. For months, we scoured the countryside, carefully picking apart any clues or traces of the creature. For every hint we received though, only more mystery followed. The strangest thing about all of the information we gathered was that it all seemed to be second-hand. Any of the people I talked to mentioned a friend of a friend who had gone looking for it. Sometimes they found what they were looking for. Sometimes, however, well, let's just say that the details are as varied as opinions on the Pokemon were. I heard it was 80 feet tall. Man, I'd love to go after this thing myself. My friend said her brother described it as shimmering. He disappeared shortly afterwards though. Yeah, I've heard of it. Supposedly it only appears to the strongest trainers in the world. I wouldn't go near it. Last I heard, the guy who went after it never came back. Rumour has it that it can change shapes. Pokemon are gentle creatures by nature, but this thing? It's a killer. If you want to keep breathing, don't go looking for it. Most of them had the same ring to them. The Pokemon in question was dangerous. On top of that, supposedly none of the trainers went after it were ever seen again. While I admit it was beginning to worry me, the challenge was that much more tempting. So, when I finally got a solid lead, you can bet that I dropped everything I was doing and followed it up. We'd been travelling south from Pallet Town for about 2 days by sea. My Lapras had always been a strong swimmer, much faster than Blastoise. Together, we rowed confidently towards the far southern volcanic belt where I'd once faced off against Blaine for the Volcano badge. I gave her a soft rub down along her neck every now and then, just to show my thanks for her work. She always replied in kind by trying to push the pace faster, even if I'd told her over and over that there was no hurry. We finally had something to look into, with a solid backstory now. There'd be plenty of time to follow it up. Over the last 2 weeks of information gathering, some of the clues had begun to point to a very specific beach on Cinnabar Island, along with newsreels and newspaper clippings reporting missing people in the area. 1 or 2 of my leads had directed me there by way of similar stories about trainers on vacations. Trainers who, like the rest, hadn't come home. There was one final piece of information, however, that absolutely captivated my attention. Now, you have to remember that Cinnabar Island was known for its volcanic activity. Based on this assumption, one can further assume that there are a lot of open pits to fall into, given the island's semi-mountainous nature. While that could have explained a few of the disappearances, there was one in particular that was marked by such an oddity that it couldn't so easily be explained away. According to the eyewitness reports, just after a trainer had set off running full tilt up the shoreline to go after an unnamed Pokemon, the sky over the beach was ripped apart by a shimmering glow that expanded outward like a shockwave. When police had arrived on the scene, all they had found was the trainer's beach shorts and 2 very badly damaged Pokeballs. The Pokeballs themselves looked like they had been cross-sectioned away, almost as though someone had taken a die punch and chipped perfectly square pieces out of them intently. By the time Lapras and I had finally made landfall on the northern shore of the sprawling island, you could say I was practically chomping at the bit to take my crack at capturing this Pokemon. Anyone with any common sense might think I was crazy, but that is where I'd say that anyone who wouldn't take this chance was crazy. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Not like I hadn't had plenty of those already. So, after we checked in at the Pokemon Center and took a short half-day break, we circled the island and came down on the eastern shore. Lapras and I began a search pattern immediately. Up and down the coastline we scoured for any traces of the mysterious Pokemon. 3 days we spent, following the same continuous pattern. By day we searched. By night, I curled up next to my beloved water Pokemon on the sandy beach, and together, we drifted off to sleep in each other's warm, though sometimes often very damp, comfort. On the 4th day, I was about to give up hope. We'd just done a 23rd consecutive trip up the shoreline, when a cry from the beach rang out and caught my attention. Turning my head swiftly to investigate the source, I saw a group of 3 beachgoers running in panic down the shore, obviously desperate to get away from something. With a quick pat to her shell, Lapras and I spun on the spot and made a Beedrill line for the beach. No sooner had we landed, did the sand beneath us begin to quake fiercely. Casting my sight to where the people had been fleeing from, I waited in hesitant anticipation as I stood upon Lapras' shell. The trees near the shore began to tremble. I crouched down, ready to possibly face the mystery Pokemon I'd been searching for. My mouth watered intensely. Every muscle in my body was prepared for this moment. At that moment, in the glistening bright sunshine of the seaside of the island paradise, a Rhydon came bursting from the foliage. I sat there, stunned in awe for a moment, not believing my luck. Of all the Pokemon in the world I could have faced, legendary or not, all of that commotion came because of a Rhydon? While not particularly common species to the island, neglectful trainers were often known for abandoning their Pokemon when they were no longer wanted. It wasn't exactly out of the ordinary, but it also wasn't what I'd been hoping for. I sighed heavily, my heart sinking. This wouldn't be any challenge at all. If anything, I'd be doing a public service. I'd already caught and evolved a Rhyhorn. But I couldn't very well leave a rampaging Pokemon in such a highly trafficked tourist location. Buckling down with a quick mutter, I gave Lapras a signal as I hopped off her shell. She squealed once more in acknowledgement, before firing off the high-powered water gun. Without even looking, as I turned away in disgust at the situation, I knew the water gun had hit its target. My girl didn't miss. Ever. So, one can imagine my surprise when I still felt the incoming pounding of the rock type. That caught my attention. I spun around in the sand once more to face the charging Pokemon. Though thoroughly soaked from head to toe, it didn't seem fazed in the least. Perhaps this one might be worth adding to the collection after all, instead of turning it over to the Pokemon Center. If only so the professor could study its seeming immunity to water. I snapped my hat around to sit backwards, putting on my game face. If this Pokemon wanted a battle, I sure wouldn't disappoint. Alright girl, full force Ice Beam, hit it! I didn't need to say anything, but it still felt all that much more satisfying to see the beam of glacial energy racing across the scorching sand our opponent at my command. What came next? I could never have predicted. The Rhydon literally split into pieces as the Ice Beam connected, flying apart into 5 sections before coalescing once again into a whole Pokemon. As it did, it gave away the telltale sign that I'd been looking for. There had been a brief but brilliant flash of something ethereal in its body. Despite it having taken the form of a Rhydon, I had found my mystery Pokemon. Now it was time to get intense. Pokedex in one hand, Pokeball in the other. I flipped open Dexter and aimed it true. No Pokemon data found. I stared down at the red device in my hand, dumbstruck by what the electronic voice had said. Of all the 250 some Pokemon I've encountered, not one of them registered. I hit the refresh button a couple of times just to make sure Dex hadn't glitched. No Pokemon data found, it repeated again. The whole time, Lapras had been continually assaulting it with an Ice Beam, intent on keeping it distracted while I check it out. I snapped the Pokedex shut, pocketed it, and snapped my finger. Lapras halted her attack. Take to the waves and give it a surf attack. Lapras, go! Dutifully, my faithful Pokemon dove into the water, dragging along behind her a torrent of foamy wash that doubled in size as she swam out deeper before looping back around. As she came closer to the shore, the sand shelf began to bolster the waves up until she was riding atop of them, with all 4 flippers urging the tidal force faster. Lapras came crashing down on top of the Pokemon in a raging flood of salty ocean water, her full weight plus that of the wave bearing down on it. With wide, disbelieving eyes, I watched my girl be tossed aside as though she were a rag doll. The attack never even made contact with the Rhydon imitation. It parted around the rock type, as though something had just split the wave in two. Lapras came crashing to the sand, skidding to a halt a dozen feet or so in front of me. I raced up to her, checking to make sure she was alright. Looking no worse for wear, I gave her a quick embrace before she rounded once more to the thing that had swatted her like a fly. What I saw next, I can't even understand myself. The Rhydon, or whatever it was, started shimmering in a glow that made evolution pale in comparison. It was beautiful, beyond belief. There came a series of warm, pleasant breezes that pulsed off its shining form that brushed past the two of us like calm summer's day. This was when it all went south. The glowing Pokemon began to grow and distort. While it would never reach the supposed 80 feet that some had reported, it grew to a massive height that had me craning my neck backwards just to look at the whole thing. When the shine faded, I can barely begin to describe what I was looking at. It looked, for all intents and purposes, like someone had banged up an old television screen to the point where it would show nothing but static. Interspersed throughout the static, however, were the strangest shapes and symbols I'd ever seen. Even comparing them to the unknown in the Alpha Ruins couldn't come close to matching. These patterns flickered all over its constantly shifting body, if you could even call it that, as various parts of it seemed to fade in and out of existence at random. I had no clue what I was looking at. All I know was that this thing terrified me. And I tried the Pokedex once more. No Pokemon data, and like that, Dexter basically exploded in my hand. I reached down with my other, cradling my now injured hand as I dropped the Pokedex. The Pokeball that I'd been holding in the other plunked into the sand with nary a sound. Without warning, the abomination of a Pokemon loosed a cry. The sound and volume of countless garbled Pokemon voices filled my ears. It was a sound of absolute abject terror-inducing magnitude. I don't remember if it was then that we decided to flee. I can't even recall how far we made it before the noise gave out. All I know is that I was horrified beyond all rational thought. Somewhere in the distance, someone was calling for help. They'd seen it too, but there was nothing to be done now. A tremendous gust of wind blew me off my feet as I fled. I remember being caught out of the air by Lapras, swinging down from her mouth as she let go of my vest. I clung to her neck tightly, all the while just hoping to get away. We didn't even see it coming until it was too late. There was a flash, and another aurora erupted down the beach ahead of us, quicker than lightning. The monster came swooping past, blowing up huge gouts of sand in its wake. I felt myself go airborne for the second time that day, landing hard on my back in the sand. As I sat up, rubbing my sore head, I could feel the burning pain in my left hand slowly ebbing away from where the dex had practically tried to melt itself to my glove. Bringing it down for inspection, I think that's when I started to snap. Just like the damaged Pokeballs I'd read about, my hand was beginning to float away, in tiny, perfectly square glowing fragments that would levitate up and vanish in a shimmering flash of light. I could only stare at it, as it kept happening until there was nothing left below the wrist. Somewhere in my mind, a stuck gear clicked, and I looked at Lapras. On the beach, my poor Pokemon was suffering a similar fate, but to a much greater degree. My hand all but forgotten, I rushed over to my beautiful girl and knelt down to her, placing my head next to hers as before my very eyes, she was being disassembled into nothingness. Together we stayed like that, until the last pieces of my precious water baby had vanished into thin air. The mysterious Pokemon had disappeared by this point, leaving me alone to try and piece together everything that had just happened. I sat there, in something of a mental shock for what felt like hours, looking between where Lapras had just been, and at the remaining stump of my left wrist. I know the police came and combed the beach, even running past me now and again like I wasn't there. Nurse Joy eventually arrived on the scene, and retrieved me from my place in the sand. While she was a Pokemon healer, she was also Cinnabar Island's main medical resource as well. I underwent questioning when Officer Jenny eventually came round to Pokemon Center to see how I was faring, and to deliver what was left of my ruined Pokedex. I don't remember much, but what struck me as odd was that neither of them seemed to realize that I was missing my hand, like it had been gone the whole time or something. I was still in stunned silence about it, my mind further attempting to try and make sense of what I'd seen. Though Officer Jenny tried to ask me what happened, I wasn't there. At least, I think that's the best way to describe it. I spent the next 2 days on Cinnabar Island, attempting to recover from the battle. I didn't eat or sleep. I just sat there in one of the recovery rooms, trying to understand. When I did finally manage to find my voice, I think all I did was scream for however long it took me to lose it again in the hoarseness. It had taken Nurse Joy's Chansey and 2 Wigglytuffs singing in concert just to lull me to sleep that night. When I awoke the next morning, I at least had enough sense of mind to start asking questions. I spoke with Nurse Joy at length about the attack, but when I tried to explain to her what had happened, I couldn't believe her reaction. You checked in with only 5 Pokemon when you got here. Charizard, Blastoise, Venusaur, Pikachu and Snorlax. No Lapras. When we found you on the beach after Rhydon attacked, you were just kind of stunned. It was as if she had forgotten. I tried to show her my missing hand, just to prove my story. She shrugged it off as though it had always been gone. There was no physical damage after all. If anyone were to look at it, just a rounded nub of taut skin where the appendage used to be. It was like it had been surgically removed, and the skin grafted with such perfection to have never been disturbed at all. When I tried to have her review the check-in log, my panic rose even further. There were only 5 Pokemon listed with me. I knew that it couldn't have been faked. The computers were infallible in that respect, unless someone had purposely tampered with the log. The machine checked each Pokeball presented specifically for the Pokemon inside, and I know I had turned them all in for a good rest after the trip to the island. My hand flew to my belt to feel for Lapras's Pokeball, but that too had vanished. None of it made any sense. The longer I stared at the log, the less I was convinced that what I was seeing was real. And then I saw it. It was only a momentary flicker on the screen, just in the bottom corner, punctuated by the tiniest of sounds through the speakers as its shrill cry wavered in the recess of the depths of my mind. The mystery Pokemon was there. I backpedaled so fast, I ended up knocking over both Nurse Joy and her Chansey before hitting the ground with a hard slap of flesh on tile. My breath caught my throat and my heart raced. Nurse Joy asked if I was alright, but my voice was once again lost in terror. I stood up, keeping an eye on the monitor as I backed away slowly from the computer, never once taking my eyes off of it. When I felt the front door of the Pokemon Center at my back, I spun around and threw the doors open as fast as I could, and ran outside into the city. Yet, it was there too, flickering in and out of an existence just beyond the range of sight down the street. Reflected off a glass storefront, I heard that horrendous cry once again. That was all it took to get me moving. I flew down the streets to the northern coast. Upon reaching the sands, I released Blastoise from his Pokeball, hopped on and commanded him to get us out of there. I can only imagine the face of the startled beachgoers on the northern shore as we rocketed out of there across the water as fast as Blastoise could take us. Finally, as the island disappeared into the distance, my unease began to settle. We were getting far away from that monster. This would be one trainer that would live to tell the tale. For the 2-day trip home, I didn't spot the thing a single time. As we pulled into the southern coastline of Pallet Town, I finally felt a bit more relaxed. Even the complex situation with my missing hand seemed to be fading from my mind. Returning Blastoise to his Pokeball, I immediately took what was left of my Pokedex to Professor Oak. When he saw the burnt out, half-melted piece of machinery, he could barely believe his eyes. I watched as he hooked up the remainder of the memory core to his computer to try and find the Pokemon culprit responsible for destroying his genius invention. The professor spent 5 hours that day trying to piece together the severely damaged data that the Dex had recorded. For the most part, I sat out in the waiting room in his main office as I continued piecing together the fragments of memory I retained from the incident. He came out partway through his investigation, and I tried to relate to him the things that had happened. I told him everything, from the initial encounter to when one of my best and closest friends essentially evaporated in front of my eyes. Professor Oak took it all in stride, only showing the barest hint of any emotion outside of intrigue when I began to tear up at the still fresh wound in my heart. It wasn't the sympathy one might have expected though. He wore a look of pure confusion. I'd even tried showing my hand as well, but just like Nurse Joy, he seemed to pass it off as though it had always been gone. When he returned to finish with the Pokedex, I remained behind like before. There was nothing I could do but contemplate my experience. I couldn't take it. Just sitting there was going to drive me even more mad if I let it. So, I took it upon myself, just then, to see what Oak had dug up about the remains of my Dex. The cry reverberated all throughout the interior of the lab. I froze on the spot as it did, looking all around for the source in a panic. That is the most peculiar sound I've ever heard. The professor was staring down at his desktop monitor, scrolling through what little data he'd managed to retrieve. Along with the sound file of the monster, he'd managed to glean a little bit of information out of the melted hardware that was my Pokedex. Relaxing only just slightly, I approached the screen and took a look for myself at what it had to say. Pokedex entry 000, missing no. Height unknown. Weight unknown. Habitat unknown. Footprint data unknown. Cry sound file recovered. Data not enough information. Pokedex entry incomplete. Data file missing no. Contains corrupted data. Could not extrapolate. What does this all mean? I pondered aloud. Professor Oak continued to ponder the information on the monitor, his hand to his chin in thought. Well, from what I can tell, what we have here is a glitch in the Pokédex. What it's telling me is that there's corrupted data in a file that doesn't exist. While I personally programmed the Pokédex, even I can't explain this. I checked the police report from Cinnabar Island that was submitted, and something did indeed attack you. But what was it? That's the mystery here. Certainly no Rhydon could have done this to my invention. As if it needed reminding, he waved a hand towards the melted red steel casing of Dexter. So, this missing node does exist then, I asked. Oak nodded. The fact that it's labelled as missing node just means that there's data in the Pokédex that's been saved as free space for backup data, just in case. When you tried to analyse this Pokemon, that extra data space was accessed. The Pokédex tried to create an entry based on data that doesn't exist, instead of examining the Pokemon that attacked you. So that's why it exploded then? Quite. It can only get so far before the processor inside overheat from the strain of attempting to try and compute something that it wasn't made to handle. It caused so much of a draw on the system's power unit that the core collected far too much energy. Since that energy couldn't be routed into the desired processes, seeing as the Pokédex isn't meant to create data based on its scans, it all pulled into one place instead of looping back to the power pack. Oak sighed as he brought the wreckage up to his eyes for inspection. The system, though, wound up in a feedback loop trying to create and analyze data at the same time, continuously trying to draw more power for its processing, and the explosion was the result. Truth be told, even if I had been in my right frame of mind, Professor Oak's long-winded explanation still would have been hard to wrap my head around. Of everything that had come of it though, at least I had a name for my nightmare now. Missing Node. Before I left for the day, Oak provided me with a new Pokédex for continued use in case I ever ran into the beast again. This one, however, had been cleared of all the backup space needed for the extra data storage. In theory, if I ever ran into Missing No, the new Dex should have been able to classify it a lot easier than the old model have had. While the newer model Pokédex was nice, I didn't intend to ever go looking for that bastard again. I decided to return home to see my mum that night. I was in Pallet Town after all. Surely, if there was anyone who'd realised that something was wrong with her son, it'd be my own mother. But just like everyone else, Mum didn't seem fazed by my missing hand. When I asked her about it, she couldn't quite explain it. She was not, however, acting like it was anything out of the ordinary. Nothing I said could convince her that I was missing my hand. It was all too bizarre for me. It seemed like there was nothing left to do but retire for the evening. No matter how strange the last week had been, I could do nothing to convince anyone that something was definitely wrong. As I lay in bed, contemplating my position, I could find no way to prove anything. Even after searching through my family photos that night, I discovered that each and every one of them was missing something. Particularly, that one part of myself I was now staring at. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the stump of my left wrist as I fell asleep that night. I woke the next morning to the sound of pots and pans clanging around in the kitchen downstairs. Rolling out of bed, I got dressed as quickly as I could, fumbling with any buttons or laces. That would quickly have to change if I was going to continue on like this. I walked downstairs to see my mother busily preparing breakfast for the two of us, the way she might have done if I'd set out on my journey some 4 years prior. It was calming normalcy of that kept my mind off the insanity of my situation at the time, as I sat down at the table and vaguely half listened to the television. The news was broadcasting their usual drivel. There had been nothing of interest according to the news anchor, save for one reported incident of an out-of-sorts Rhydon attack on Cinnabar Island. I scoffed at that, even as the anchor related the story. As Mum brought over a plate piled with pancakes, I cast the television from my attention and uneasily settled in to begin breakfast. That was until I heard it. It was the briefest of interruptions, but static flared across the television, and by the time I turned to look at the TV, it was as though nothing had happened. Cautiously, I kept an eye on the screen to see if it would happen again. After a few moments of peace on the broadcast screen, I returned my attention to the breakfast before me. It flickered again. This time, When I spun to face the television set, I caught just the barest of glimpses before the static cut back to the picture. The shifting symbols were there. Intent not to let my nerves get the better of me, I decided it was nothing. Just a simple flashback. Probably post-traumatic stress. I did just lose one of my favourite Pokemon. Not to forget a part of myself. I'd probably be jumping at stack for a few weeks to come yet. Beside that, I'd left that thing far behind on Cinnabar Island. There was no way it could find me here. The TV flickered yet again, just as I turned to continue my breakfast. Out of the corner of my eye, there it was. The beast, missing no, was plastered all over the screen for as long as it took me to train my eyes on it, before it vanished once more. Now I knew I wasn't seeing things. That bastard had followed me. Without any word of warning, I got up and ran outside into the gloomy light of an overcast day. The wind was blowing in gusts, heralding an incoming storm. If only Mother Nature knew just how right she was. I had to get out of there. Everyone was at risk while I was around. So, I did what anyone would do when they found out an omnipresent super being bent on their utter destruction was tracking them like sportsmen in a Vulpix hunt. I ran. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. Everywhere I went, I would see it, just out the edges of my peripheral vision. It was stalking me. I traced my path through Kanto region, from back when I'd just begun my Pokemon journey. I hid out in the abandoned power plant outside of Cerulean City for a few days, sequestered myself away in Rock Tunnel, thinking that the presence of all those Onix would keep it at bay. No matter where I went though, it always seemed to get there before me. While making my way back up through Celadon City, I saw a poster for a carnival, featuring an all-Eevee and Eeveelution act. That brought my mind to an entry in the Pokedex I'd made while I was in the Johto region. Quickly typing it up, I found just what I was looking for. Pokemon number 196, Espeon. Data, the Sun Pokemon. It uses its fine hair that covers its body to sense air currents. By reading air currents, it can predict things such as the weather or its foe's next move. The tip of its forked tail will quiver when it does so. Fortunately for me, I had acquired an Eevee or two during my travels. It would be a small matter to train one up until it evolved. Stopping by a Pokemon Center, I had Oak transfer me one for the duration of my trip. Let me tell you, I spent the next few weeks getting real close to that Eevee. It would be my saving grace. At least, so I hoped. By the time it had evolved into an Espeon, I had been chased out of every major city in both the Kanto and Johto regions by Missing No. It seemed to be hunting me, no matter where I went. Now though, I had an early warning system. Espeon quickly learned how to pick up on Missing No's movements. Before I would even realise the bastard was there, my little Espeon would be on top of things and alerting me to its presence. There would be no way for it to sneak up on me now. For a time, I travelled in relative ease with my newfound companion. Espeon quickly meshed with my team, despite him having a lack of significant time to spend with them. After all, we were constantly on the run from the beginning of his stay with us. Through all of it though, we prevailed and managed to stay ahead of the beast. And that's when you showed up. I thought I could finally relax for a while. I even returned to the Pokemon League headquarters for a few days, stopping in to see if things had changed there. What do I hear when I do? Some kid trying to work his way through the Johto League to make it to the Indigo Plateau, and he was crushing all opposition, just so he could have a shot at me. To become the next Pokemon champion. You know, it'd been so long since I'd even thought about that. How many challenges had come and gone in my absence? How many were waiting in line for their turn at the Great Red of Pallet Town? This was not the time for such confrontations, and I knew it. So I left once again. I abandoned my tile. I couldn't afford to waste time and effort on such things anymore. Staying in one place meant death. It meant the end of my existence. I told them that I'd go training somewhere. Mount Silver sounded like a good place to make my stand, if any. With plenty of high-level Pokemon to give me an advanced warning, and Espeon by my side to do that with even greater strength, I doubt the bastard would even make it to me. Surely, with enough Pokemon against him, he'd back down eventually, right? So I set out. I scaled Mount Silver. It took me almost 2 weeks, but we made it to the top. For a while, things were comfortable. There was ample food to be had from scavenging the forest, and I could see for miles around me. Nothing was going to sneak up on me. Not one single solitary thing. And there you were. I have to give you credit, kid. I don't know your name, but I imagine that you'd make one heck of a friend. I've abandoned all of mine, saved my Pokemon so long ago that it feels like forever since I came to the top of this mountain. But here you are, staring me down, waiting for the one battle that you won't let be. All because you have to be the very best, just like I did. I give in, knowing that there's no escaping it. I say nothing as the battle begins, standing there with what you'd believe to be one hand in my vest pocket, tugging my hat down over my eyes, saying nothing as my Pokemon beat against yours relentlessly. I've said it before, I don't need to give my Pokemon orders. Our bond is too deep for such trivial things anymore. They know what I want, just like I understand them without speaking their language. As the pitched war rages on, it's almost like I can feel him coming. I might have had a barrier of the strongest wild Pokemon in existence between him and me, if you hadn't destroyed him on the way up. I don't even have Espeon to warn me anymore. You saw to that too. The poor thing's knocked out cold in his Pokeball from the sound thrashing your Typhlosion gave it. The wind whips up around us at the summit of Mount Silver, and still the fight continues, until all I have left is my Pikachu. Having had him the longest of any of my Pokemon, it's no surprise that he takes out more than 3 of yours in a few swift maneuvers. It's down to the wire now. And there he is. You'll never see him. You won't notice him. For that, you should be grateful. You won't be hunting you, my worthy foe. He's here for me. As Pikachu goes tumbling into the snow-crusted mountain beneath us, lying at my feet, I humbly accept my defeat. I say nothing as you turn around and begin your hike back down the mountain, seeing the harbinger of my destruction materializing out of thin air like a phantom that I just can't seem to understand the rhyme or reason of. As I watch your retreating form through its shapeless mass, I can't help but wonder, if I'd been satisfied with that final victory, would I have been here now? Just for the sheer want of any kind of explanation why. I pull the new Pokedex out of my pocket and flip it open, pointing it at missing No. No Pokemon data found, it droned in its casual robotic voice. Closing my eyes and Pokedex as well, I feel that familiar tingling numbness begin to creep over my body. I wonder, what's it going to be like? Thank you for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like it, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you'll never miss a story. Oh, and if you haven't already, don't forget to follow me on Twitter so you can keep up with the latest goings on the channel.